What is tonality? Well, to answer that question, I need to backtrack. Tonality is an abstract noun deriving from the word tonal, and tonal is an adjective that means having the qualities of a tone. But what is a tone? Well, outside of music theory, tone means all sorts of things. For example, it can mean attitude, like when you say, I didn't like the tone of his email, even though no tone is to be heard anywhere in what he wrote. Still, when it comes to sound, tone is sometimes used to mean the same thing as timbre, as with the tone control on an amplifier. But those two meanings of the word aren't the most usual ones. Normally, tone is a concept that relates to pitch, and that's certainly true with tonal languages, like Mandarin Chinese, which has the following 4 tones.
B, 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 B.
The different meanings of those 4 syllables is obviously connected to differences of pitch. In music, a tone can be defined as any type of note that has an audible fundamental pitch. That begs the question, what is a note? To answer that, here's a MIDI piano roll screen of the intro to J.J. Cale's Cocaine from 1977. It shows every minimal event of what is played. Each event can be very short, like the individual hi-hat hits, or it can be longer, like the guitar chord on B. In MIDI, those minimal sound events are called notes. Now, some of the notes in this extract are tones because they have an audible fundamental pitch, like in the bass part. But other notes played at the same time are not tonal. They have no audible fundamental pitch. Okay, so the hi-hat is pitched high and the bass drum low, but is not the same sort of high as a high note on the piccolo, and is not the same sort of low as a low note on the tuba. That's because it has a fundamental pitch but doesn't, and has a fundamental pitch but doesn't. Tonal notes, tones, can be named and notated on the stave because they have a fundamental pitch, as with the guitar part here, while the drum kit notes have no pitch names and are notated on a special percussion stave. To summarize, in music, a note is a discrete minimal sound event. A tone is a note with audible fundamental pitch. All tones are, in other words, notes, but not all notes are tonal. Tonality is therefore basically the quality of being tonal or of having a tone or tones. But it has another meaning, because it can also mean the way in which tones are configured in a given style of music or in a given musical tradition. And that's like the meaning of the word language.
Hallo, ich bin Mr. Schneepflug.
You see, language can mean both the general phenomenon of humans using words, and it can mean the way in which a particular community uses a particular vocabulary of words, like the English language, the French language, like Chinese and so on. And it's in the same way that tonality can also mean a particular way of configuring tones, as in the sense of a tonal idiom. Well, if everything were that simple, there'd be no problem. The trouble is that the word tonality has been used and abused to mean a whole variety of things. The first difficulty concerns Neo-Latin languages and the use of the word tonalité, tonalidad, tonalità, and so on to designate not what in English we mean by tonality or in German by Tonalität, but to designate key or Tonart. That causes a problem because key, Tonart, and Tonalité designate a very specific aspect of tonality. More precisely, they refer to the tonic, the central keynote of a piece or a passage of music, and to the mode of the passage or of the piece. I'll come back to tonic and mode a little later on. Here, though, I would suggest to speakers of Neo-Latin languages that they continue to use tonalité, tonalità, tonalidad, and so on to refer to what in English we call key, or what the Germans call Tonart, and that they use an expression like idiom tonal or idioma tonal and so on to designate what we mean by tonality or tonalität. That will solve one problem, a pretty practical one, but there's another and more abusive and serious problem to do with the meaning of the word tonality, and that's what I'll address now. The underlying difficulty with the notion of tonality, as it's often used in conventional Western music theory, is that it designates one single tonal idiom and one only, the Euroclassical. And that's a tonality which is familiar to just one part of the population in the world's smallest continent during just a couple of 100 years. According to this very restrictive use of the word tonality, is tonal, but and are not. And that's like saying that thank you is a verbal state and that thank you constitutes language, whereas words like merci, danke, tak, kitos, evcharisto, grazie, gracias, obrigado, shukran, spasiba,
谢谢
and so on are all non-verbal, not language. Obviously that makes no sense, but it's exactly what happens if you ethnocentrically assume your own language to be language because you understand it, and everyone else's to be nonsensical blah 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 blah, or as the ancient Greeks put it, ba 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 barbarian. Such linguistic ethnocentrism is obviously out of order. By the same token, excluding plus a whole host of other tonal idioms from the notion of tonality has to be regarded as totally unacceptable. Using tonality to refer to and to no other sort of tonality means that and so on have to be identified as something else, as others diverging from a unilaterally proclaimed norm. That alterification has produced some embarrassingly absurd terms. Okay, so the first bizarre term to deal with is atonal. Now the A in atonal is an alpha privative, just like in atheist, for example, a no-God person, or as in ahistorical, no sense of history, or as in atypical, not typical. So, atonal should mean, logically, not tonal or without tones, like this, for example. On the other hand, music like this is absolutely jam-packed with tones, so it must surely be tonal. Well, not in standard Western conventional music theory, which perversely calls this music atonal. How on earth could things become so silly? I mean, it's not as if I'm the only person complaining about this nonsense. Even Schoenberg objected to his music being called atonal. The only plausible explanation seems to be that conventional Western music theorists have managed to confuse tone with tonic. I'll explain. It's as if the main reference tone in a piece of music, its keynote or its tonic, has been mistaken or confused with any old type of tone. Now, although this music is tonal because it contains a lot of tones, no tonic is either intended or implied in this music, which is configured according to the tonal rules of 12-tone composition. So, the music is therefore not atonal, but either atonical or non-tonical, because it's characterized by a lack of tonic, no tonic, not by a lack of tones. It contains loads of them. Yes, folks, tone gives rise to both the adjective tonal and to the noun tonic. And just as clinical things happen in clinics, just as tropical weather occurs in the tropics, and just as rhetorical devices like this just as occur in rhetoric, tonal music featuring a tonic is tonical, and tonal music without a tonic is atonical or non-tonical. Simple as that. Similarly, just as the noun music gives rise to the adjective musical and to the abstract noun musicality, the noun tonic gives rise to the adjective tonical and to the abstract noun tonicality. It's like this linguistic pattern in English. You have physics, physical physicality, practice, practical practicality, technique, technical technicality, tropics, tropical tropicality, tonic, tonical tonicality. Well, that's a simple and logical solution to one embarrassing paradox of Western music theory and its basic misrepresentation of the notion of tonality. But there's another common misuse of the word that's even more nonsensical than the one caused by confusing the notions of tone and tonic. I'm talking here about the absurd binary tonality versus modality. To understand how preposterous this binary is, I need to first define the word mode. Well, in music theory, mode is basically used to conceptualize tonal vocabulary and its configuration. That's to say, which tones occur in the music, which ones are more important, which ones are used more often, or are highlighted more than others, and so on. To make this rather abstract definition a bit clearer, here are 6 melodic extracts, each with a clear single tonic and each using a clearly different mode.
Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone. It's not unusual to have fun with anyone.
Quando llegué a terra ardendo, qual fogueira de São João, eu perguntei a Deus do céu, ai, por que tamanha judiação?
Well, I hope that was all clear enough. Just to make sure, I'll now summarize the basic tonal traits of those 6 modes. Extract number 1 in the montage, Scarborough Fair, was heptatonic, and in the Dorian mode, whose scale degrees are 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, major 6 and flat 7. Number 2, the synthesized bagpipe extract containing no third, neither major nor minor, was in the Re hexatonic mode, which means scale degrees 1, 2, 4, 5, major 6 and flat 7. Example 3, the Bulgarian metal piece in 7/8 was in the Hijaz mode, whose scale degrees run 1, flat 2, major 3, 4, 5, flat 6 and flat 7. Extract number 4, the start of Mozart's piano sonata in C, K545, was in the Ionian mode, whose scale degrees are 1, 2, major 3, 4, 5, major 6 and major 7. That was quite similar to extract number 5, the Tom Jones tune, whose melody also contained 1, 2, major 3, 4, 5 and major 6, but no 7, neither major nor minor, and was consequently labelled Do hexatonic. The last melodic example, Luis Gonzaga's Bayon, was in Mixolydian G with the scale degrees 1, 2, major 3, 4, 5, major 6 and flat 7. All these 6 melodic modes are defined by the way their tones are configured, and they're therefore all tonal. Yes, because the identity of each mode is defined by particular tonal features. The conceptual absurdity in conservative Western music theory is that only excerpt 4, the Mozart, and maybe excerpt 5, it's not unusual, will be considered tonal and as examples of tonality, whereas all the others will not, and instead they'll very likely be labelled modal and considered as examples of modality. The warped logic behind this absurd binary runs as follows. The Ionian mode has 7 tones, it is therefore tonal. The Dorian mode is not the Ionian, it is therefore not tonal. The Dorian is a mode, it is therefore modal. The Ionian mode is not the Dorian, it is therefore not modal. That's like the ethnocentric absurdity I mentioned earlier. You know, the English language contains many words and therefore constitutes language. French, Russian, Chinese and so on are not English and therefore do not constitute language.
Most illogical.
In fact,
Highly illogical.
It's embarrassingly illogical.
in the age of internet access to a plethora of different tonalities, the ethnocentric hijacking of tonality as a concept isn't just illogical, it's also patently ridiculous.